بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. نعم. Moving forward with our next phrase. So far we've begun with the chart, the qawl chart. And in qawl we covered al-mufrad, ism, fi'l, and harf. Ism is a word that indicates a meaning in and of itself without being attached to a tense. Fi'l is a word which indicates a meaning in and of itself whilst being attached to a tense. And harf is a word that indicates a meaning in something else. And then in each section we've explained it thoroughly. We said that the ism breaks up into, and based on different classifications. You can have an ism that is mudhakkar, masculine, or it can be mu'annath if you add a round ta, or if the meaning of that word intrinsically is a feminine meaning. And we said that the ism can also be ma'rifa and nakira. The ism from a different perspective can also be ma'rifa, which is definite or specific, or it can be nakira, which is general, which in English comes down to a man as opposed to the man. So the is specific and a is general. Obviously, there's other ways to make a word specific, which we'll cover later on bi'idhnillah. Then we covered the fi'l. We mentioned that the fi'l is the madi, the mudari, the amr. The mudari is the madi, afwan, is the past tense. And you've already studied the madi verb. I am hoping you have memorized it by now. Nasara, nasara, nasaru. Nasrat, nasrata, nasarna. Nasrata, nasartu, ma nasartum. Nasarti, nasartu, ma nasartunna. Nasartu, nasarna. Once again with translations. Nasara, he one man helped. Nasara, they two men helped. Nasaru, they all men helped. Nasarat, she one female helped. Nasarata, they two females helped. Nasarna, they all females helped. Nasarta, you one man helped. Nasartuma, you two men helped. Nasartum, you all males helped. Nasartu, you and females helped. Nasartu ma, you two females helped. Nasartuna, you all females helped. Nasartu, I helped. Nasarna, we helped. Tamam, this is covered. If that was too fast, just slow down the video and listen to it again. Naam. We covered the fi'l madi. The fi'l mudari we mentioned to you is the present slash future tense. Context will decide whether the meaning that's intended is present or it's future. We said that this fi'l is oftentimes, or not oftentimes, it's always going to have one of the four prefixes, either the ya, the ta, the ala, the hamza, or the noon, which is gathered in atayna. So yansuru, tansuru, ansuru, nansuru. You're always going to have this added on to the root letters, this addition added on in the beginning of the fi'l mudari'. And this will be taught later on bi'idhnillah. But for now, make sure you understand the fi'l madi well. The fi'l al-amr is the command verb, which oftentimes ends in jazm or a sukoon. And again, this will be taught later on bi'idhnillah. Then we covered the harf. We said that the harf is either muhmal or mu'mal. Muhmal means that the harf does not affect the position. Mu'mal means the harf does affect a position. Like fi affects the upcoming word. It causes it to go into the role of jar. And the role of jar is falls under the position of jar. Or often the role of majrur. The role of majrur falls under the position of jar, which is reflected oftentimes by a kasra. Like fil masjidi. As opposed to a harf muhmal, which cannot actually affect a position. Like the alif lam, al masjidu masjidun. It did not affect the position. Fi masjidin, you have a kasratain. Fil masjidi, you still have a kasra. So the position remains the same. The word after the fi in both scenarios is still majrur, right? The alif lam is not causing the word to become marfu' or the word to be in the position of rafa'. The alif lam is not causing the word to be in the position of nasab. So it's not actually affecting the position itself. Rather, um, it's simply making the word definite or indefinite. It's affecting the meaning. And then word wise, its meaning is dropped off. The double haraka is dropped off. But the double haraka being dropped off does not mean that the position was affected. You can have masjidun, that's still in the position of rafa. You can have masjidu, al masjidu, that's still in the position of rafa. So double haraka versus single haraka does not actually mean that the position was affected. That happens as a result of other reasons. Now, then we explained to you exactly what i'rab is in the language. And I haven't used this word i'rab because I don't want you to get lost in the word. But i'rab essentially is the position. When we talk about positions, i'rab is the position. Every ism you have in the Arabic language can play different roles in a sentence. And based on the different roles it plays, it will fall under one of, we mentioned four positions, and we've taught you three of them. These three positions we've taught you is jar, which has two roles, nasab, which has 13 roles, and raf, which has, we mentioned 9 roles. Okay, and we to make it easy, we said it's the offensive position. You have two over there. You have the attacking, in which you have, after we said defensive. Defensive is 9. Midfielding is going to be 13, and then the offensive position is 2. We mentioned this example to make things easier and simpler for you to understand. But then we actually applied role, position, reflection, role, position, reflection, role, position, reflection to Quranic examples. And then beyond that, we covered phrases. So under murakkab, we said you can either have a sentence or a phrase, and we're still covering phrases. Under the phrases, we mentioned a few phrases to you. We mentioned the jar majur, harful jar, followed by a majur. Majur is the role of the ism, which falls under the position of jar, which is reflected by a kasra. And then we also covered another phrase, mudaf, mudaf ilay, the possessive phrase. Mudaf is the possessed, mudaf ilay is the possessor. We mentioned the rule that mudaf comes first in the Arabic language, mudaf ilay comes second. Rule number two is that mudaf cannot receive alif, lam, or tanween. And rule number three is that mudaf ilay will be in the position of jar. So mudaf ilay is a role which falls under the position of jar, which is oftentimes reflected by a kasrah. Tamam, we've explained all this in detail. Today we move on with another phrase. So we haven't actually moved towards sentences yet. We are still on phrases. And this is an important phrase because this phrase falls under what we call, and try to remember this, or you don't have to remember this, but just keep this in mind. It's called a tabi'. Tabi' literally means a follower. Tabi' literally means a follower. Now, why is this important to keep in mind? Because the phrases you came across previously, right? Harf al-jar majur, these are phrases, right? They don't give a complete meaning. In the masjid. Okay, who's in the masjid? What's in the masjid? Complete meaning is not yet achieved. Mudaf, mudaf ilay, you came across as well. Possessive phrase, book of Muhammad, Muhammad's book. What about Muhammad's book? Doesn't give a complete meaning. Tabi' is similar. Tabi' is a phrase they will not give a complete meaning. But the difference over here is that harful jar majur, keep this in mind, the second part of this phrase, it falls under a role. Mudaf, mudaf ilay, the second part of this phrase, it's a role in the language. It is a role, and therefore it falls under your position, and that position, as we mentioned to you, is reflected by kasra. Tabi' is special. Why the tabi' is it's like a genre of phrases. We're gonna teach you one right now. So tabi' is not the name of a phrase, it's like a genre of phrases. In tabi', what happens is the second part of the phrase it's not a specific role. It just follows the first part. So if the first part, for whatever reason, is in the position of raf, the second part will also be in the position of raf. If the first part, for whatever reason, is in the position of jar, the second part will also be in the position of jar. If the first part, for whatever reason, is in the position of nasab, due to whatever role it's playing, it happens to fall under a role of nasab, and therefore it's in the position of nasab, the second part of the phrase will also be in that position. All right, so the second part of this phrase doesn't have a specific role due to which it's going to be in jar, but it just follows the first part. So if the first part is mudaf ilay, the second part will be in jar. If the first part is majur, the second part will also be in jar. But if the first part is playing a different role, like the doer, and therefore it happens to be in the position of rafa, then the second part of this phrase will also be in rafa. So it just follows the first part of the phrase. The phrase we covered today, and again, if you didn't understand that completely, it's fine because we're going to cover this right now. The phrase we're going to cover today from the tawabi', from the followers, all right, is the Mawsuf Sifah phrase. The phrase is called Mawsuf Sifah. Mawsuf means the one being described, and Sifah is the description. So, like always, let's look at a few English examples. The new student. Over here, who's being described? Think to yourself, who's being described? Student is being described. So, what does that make it? What did I say is the one being described? The Mawsuf. Therefore, student is the Mawsuf. New is the description. New is the description. Therefore, that becomes نعم, the sifa. A fast car. Who's being described? Car is being described. So that's the mawsuf. What's the description? Fast. Therefore, that is the sifa. Two short men. Two short men. Who's being described? Men. Therefore, that's the mawsuf. What's the description? Short. Therefore, that is the sifa. The pious servants. Who's being described? The servants. Therefore, that's the mawsuf. What's the description? Pious. Therefore, that is the sifa. Very simple, very easy in English, right? Okay. So Mawsuf is the one being described, and sifa is the description. Keep that in mind, and now we'll move forward. Mawsuf is the one being described, and sifa is the description. Notice in English, what comes first? In English, does the sifa come first, or does the Mawsuf come first? In English, the new student, is the description come first, Or does the one being described comes first? A fast car, two short men, the pious servants. You'll notice in English, the description, i.e., the sifa always comes first. And this is where rule one comes into play. In Arabic, that's not the case. In Arabic, the mawsuf, i.e., the one being described will always come first. This is rule number one. Rule number one, the mawsuf, i.e., the one being described, will always come first. Sifa, the description in Arabic, will come second. This is extremely important. Because rule number one, mawsuf comes first, the one being described comes first, the sifa comes second, the description comes second. Let's take these examples, right? The new student. How do you say new in the Arabic language? Or let's take tall man first. Let's take a tall man. So in English, you say a tall man. So that a, right, that's achieved by the word being nakira. Had it been specific, it would be the tall man, right? So if you know the word is nakira in Arabic, just don't add alif lam. Just don't add alif lam. So tall is tawilun. Tawilun. What does tawilun mean? Tall. As a side point, keep in mind that the vocab I present in each lesson, try to memorize it. So I'm only giving like 3, 4 words per lesson, 5 words per lesson. Over the week, try to memorize it. It's important if you want to you want to build your vocabulary. You have to build your vocabulary. You can't understand a language without building vocabulary. It's just that the method in which we build a vocabulary is not by directly memorizing from a book, it's by understanding it. And then later on, then you can start accessing books as well. So tawilun means tall. Man is rajulun. Rajulun means man. Now in Arabic, what's the okay? Number one in English, what's being described? The man. What's the description? Tall. But tall comes first in English, whereas the one being described, i.e., the man, comes second. In Arabic, we flip it. Okay, I told you in Arabic, what happens in Arabic? The mawsuf, the one being described, comes first, then comes the sifa. Therefore, when you make the sentence, you can't say tawilun rajulun. If someone comes not the sentence, you make this phrase. Someone comes along and says tawilun rajulun. No, you broke rule number one. Rule number two is that. Rule number two, once again, is that mawsuf, the one being described. Rule number one is that the one being described comes first. So rajulun needs to come first because in Arabic, the mawsuf, the one being described comes first. And then we bring tawilun. The description comes second. All right. Now let's look at a few other examples. So we said, what examples did you bring? The jadidun. We said a new, and where is the example? The new student. So how do you say student? Perhaps we've covered this. Student is talibun. Talibun means student. Okay, let's just rewrite that. Talibun means student. Over here, who's being described, the student or the new? So clearly, students being described, new is the description. So therefore, what's the mawsuf? The one being described is student. And jadid is the description. Mawsuf comes first, sifa comes second. So you don't say jadidun talib. If you say jadidun talib, you brought the sifa first. In Arabic, you bring the mawsuf first. So talibun jadidun. Jadidun means new. That's the description. Talib is the one being described. Sayyara. Let's take, for instance, um, a fast car. Now, over here, just keep one thing in mind. The example we've actually brought over here is the new student. So because it's ma'rifah, right? So we have to make talib ma'rifah. So we say at-talibu. Okay. Sayyara. Sayyara means car. The example we had was a fast car. So how do you say fast in the Arabic language? Fast in the Arabic language is sari'a. Sari'a means fast. Now, is sari'a fast the description, the sifa, or is it the mawsuf? Is it the one being described? So once again, think about it. Fast car, fast is the description of car. So in Arabic, the one being described, i.e., the mawsuf will come first, and the sifa will come second. So you're not gonna say sari'atun sayyara. Someone comes and says sari'atun. He sees a really fast car. He says sari'atun sayyara. Right? That might fly in like uh, conversational Arabic, but grammatically it's wrong because the mawsuf comes first and then comes the sifa. Therefore, you say sayyara, the one being described is brought first, and then you bring the sifa sari'a. right? So this is how we understand this rule. I hope it's clear now. Also, comes first, sifa comes second. You can apply this to some other words you've learned in the language so far in the previous lessons. Rule number two, the sifa has to follow the mawsuf in four things. This is extremely important and it might get a bit difficult, so pay attention. The sifa must follow the mawsuf in four things. Okay. Number one, the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf indefiniteness. So we told you isms can either be ma'rifa or nakira. Isms can either be ma'rifa or nakira, definite or indefinite. What's the sign of an ism being ma'rifa? Add on an alif lam. What is the sign of an ism being nakira? Remove the alif lam. This is one method of doing this. Naam. So if the mawsuf is ma'rifa, definite, the sifa also has to be ma'rifa. If the mawsuf is nakira, indefinite, the sifa also has to be nakira. So let's take our previous example. A tall man. Are you talking about a specific tall man? No, you're talking about any random tall man. So it's nakira. When you bring the mawsuf, i.e., rajulun, you're not going to add alif lam. Because if you added alif lam, it would make it definite. We want to keep this nakira so far, right? We want to keep rajul nakira, not ma'rifa. So rajulun means a man. Now we add on the sifa, tawilun. Notice I did not say at-tawilu. Had I said, for instance, at-tawilu, this would be wrong. Why? Because we said the sifa, the description, needs to follow the mawsuf in one of four in four things. Afwan. One of those four things is definiteness versus indefiniteness. The sifa needs to follow the mawsuf indefiniteness. So if rajulun is indefinite, it's general, nakira. Therefore, the sifa tawil also has to be general. It also has to be nakira. On the other hand, if I said the tall man, notice the over here in English adds specification or definiteness. It's not any random tall man, it's a very specific tall man, right? So now, how do you make the word rajul, which means a man, definite in the Arabic language? You add an alif lam. I told you when you add on alif lam, what happens to the end? The tanween drops. So ar-rajulu. Now if someone comes along and says tawilun, that's incorrect. Why is if you want to make mawsuf sifa, if you want to make a phrase, if you want to translate the tall man, ar-rajulu tawilun is incorrect. Because we said that the sifa, the description, i.e. tall, needs to follow the mawsuf. So if the mawsuf is ma'rifa, the sifa also has to be ma'rifa. Ar-rajulu at-tawilu. Ar-rajulu at-tawilu. Notice how it became ma'rifa. Ar-rajulu at-tawilu means the tall man. Okay, let's take a look at our previous example. We mentioned student, correct? What did we say about the student? We said that uh, طالب جديد, we want to say the new student. We want to say the new student. Now, when we want to say the new student, said we added on alif lam to الطالب to make it the student. When we bring a sifa now, we can't say جديد. We have to say الطالب الجديد. Because the sifa, the description, needs to follow the mawsuf in four things. One of them being definiteness versus indefiniteness. Now, in our previous example, we had نعم, a fast car. Is a fast car definite or is that indefinite? It's indefinite, it's any car. So therefore, سيارة سريعة is correct because it means a fast car. It can be any fast car. I did not make سيارة definite. I did not say السيارة, in which case it would mean the car. I said it's any car. سيارة. Therefore, سريعة cannot have alif lam either. The sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in four things, one of them being definiteness versus indefiniteness. If someone wanted to say the fast car, the fast car. So how do you make سيارة معرفة? You add an alif lam. So now it becomes السيارة. It means the car. I want to bring on a sifa, a description. I want to say it's fast. I can't say, if I want to say mawsuf sifa, I can't say السيارة سريعة. That would actually mean the car is fast. That became a sentence. We're not worried about sentences right now. I want to say the fast car. The difference is when you say the car is fast, you brought a predicate, the car, and you brought information, fast. When you say the fast car, you've only brought the predicate. What about the fast car? Is it moving? Is it broken? Did it get into a crash? So you haven't actually provided information yet. So السيارة, I want to say a phrase, the fast car. I would say السيارة السريعة. I add on the alif lam. السيارة السريعة. Notice the alif lam is added on. Alright? So if موصوف is معرفة, the صفة will also be معرفة. The second thing the صفة follows the موصوف in is gender. Gender meaning if the موصوف is مذكر, masculine, the صفة will also be مذكر. And if the موصوف is feminine, مؤنث, the صفة will also be feminine, i.e. مؤنث. Alright. So let's take a look at this. رجل means man. Right? Man. It's مذكر, it's masculine. Man is the masculine meaning. There's no round tie at the end. When we bring the صفة, طويل, which is a description, we cannot say طويلة. You cannot add on a round tie to the end of طويل. You cannot say رجل طويلة, because that would mean طويل is feminine and رجل is masculine. There's a discrepancy. We said that in موصوف صفة, the صفة needs to follow the موصوف in four things. One of them being معرفة versus nakira, definiteness versus indefiniteness. The second of them being gender. If رجل, the موصوف over here is مذكر, then the صفة needs to follow. The صفة must also be مذكر. Remember I told you that if you don't add on a round tab, and the word is not intrinsically feminine, it will be masculine. Imra means woman. Imra means woman. And you'll notice that number one, it's a feminine meaning, and then it also has a round tie at the end. So we can't say, if I want to say, for instance, a tall woman, if I want to say a tall woman, I cannot say imra'atun tawilun. This would be incorrect. This is incorrect. Why is this incorrect? Because sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in four things. One of them being definite versus indefinite. Over here, imra is indefinite. It's nakira. And tawilun is also indefinite. Awesome. But rule number two, or part B of rule number two, that it also needs to follow in gender, is missing. Imra is feminine. How do we know it's feminine? Round tie at the end. This is feminine. Tawilun is masculine because there's no round tie at the end. The correct way of saying this would be imra'atun tawilatun. Notice, what do we add on at the end? We add on the round tie to make it feminine. All right. Sayyara. Sari'. If you just say sari'un, sari'un already means fast. So now let me ask you, how do I say a fast car? Sayyara means car. Sari'un means fast. How do I say a fast car? So number one, if you said, for instance, sari'un سيارة, a fast car. This is incorrect. Rule number one, موصوف, the one being described, needs to come first in Arabic. You translated fast to سريع, and you translated car to سيارة, and you said سريع سيارة. Incorrect. Because موصوف, the one being described in Arabic, needs to come first. Over here, fast is the description. Car is the one being described. Therefore, you have to bring سيارة first. So you say سيارة. And then you say سريع. Or let's assume you say, for instance, let's assume someone says سيارة. All right. السريع. Says, look, a fast car. A fast car. We say this is incorrect because rule number two is that the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in four things. Number one is definiteness versus indefiniteness. سيارة, a car, is that definite or indefinite? We say it's indefinite because of the lack of alif lam. It's not السيارة, the car. السريع, is that indefinite or definite? Well, السريع over here happens to be, نعم, it happens to be definite because we added on an alif lam. But then that would lead to discrepancy in definiteness versus indefiniteness. If the mawsuf is indefinite, سيارة, the sifa also needs to be indefinite. You cannot add on an alif lam on the sifa if the mawsuf is indefinite. All right? Therefore, سيارة السريع is wrong. So then you come along and you say, well, I have the answer. What is the answer? سيارة. All right, mawsuf comes first. And it's indefinite. سريع. And سريع is also indefinite. Perfect. Rule number one, Mawsuf comes first. Sifa comes second. Rule number two, the Mawsuf follows the Sifa, or the Sifa follows the Mawsuf. Afwan, the Sifa follows the Mawsuf in four things. So clearly, Sayyaratun is Mawsuf, is being described. Sari'un is the Sifa. And because Sayyaratun is Nakira, no alif lam, Sari'un is also Nakira, no alif lam. Awesome, right? What's the mistake? The second thing the Sifa needs to follow the Mawsuf in is gender. Sayyaratun, car in the Arabic language is feminine. How do we know car in the Arabic language is feminine? Because there is a round ta at the end. So if sayyaratun is feminine, the sifa needs to follow. Therefore, you cannot say sayyaratun sari'un. You have to say sayyaratun sari'atun. Because the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in terms of gender. All right. So number one, it has to follow in terms of definiteness versus indefinite. Number two, the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in terms of gender. Number three, the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in amount. Now, this will get a tad bit complicated. Why? Because so far, I've already explained to you how an ism can be ma'rifah or nakira, and I've already explained to you how an ism can be mudakkar, masculine, or mu'annath, feminine. Now we explain to you that an ism has different amounts. An ism can be singular, an ism can be dual, and an ism can be plural. We have three levels in the Arabic language. All right, if an ism can be singular, which we refer to as mufrad, dual, muthanna, or plural, jama'. What's the rule? The rule is this. Wasifa has to follow the mawsuf in amount. Therefore, if the mawsuf is singular, the sifa also has to be singular. If the mawsuf is dual, the sifa also needs to be dual. And if the mawsuf is plural, the sifa also must be plural. Now, the words you've come across so far, rajulun, one man, sayyaratun, one car, they're all singular. How do you make a word dual in the Arabic language? There's a long process. Let's make things very easy. Add on an alif noon to the end. Alif noon, and the noon ends in a kasra. And how do you make a word plural? In certain words, you can add on a waw with a noon maftuha. So let's apply this. Let's apply this to a few examples of ours. Okay. Okay. Again, we're going to make it very simple and easy to understand. Otherwise, there's a lot more detail over here that can be mentioned. How do you make rajulun dual? This is a man. I want to say two men. What do we see? We add on to make a word dual, alif noon. So rajulun becomes rajulani. Notice how it became dual. How do you make imra'atun dual? Imra'atun means woman. I want to say two women. I add on an alif noon. Imra'atun becomes imra'atani. Notice how I made it dual. I just added on an alif noon. How do I make sayyaratun dual? Sayyaratun means a car. I want to say two cars. I just make it sayyara. نعم. تاني. سيارة تاني. That means two cars. So you add on alif noon to the end. All right. Now let's take a look at our examples. I want to say two tall men. I'm assuming it is general. Two tall men. So rajul, I bring my mawsuf first. Rajul, lun. And tawilun, I bring my sifa second. Rule number one is check. Rule number two, the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in four things. Number one, tawilun needs to follow rajul in terms of ma'rifah versus nakira. Well, rajul is nakira, no alif lam. Tawilun is also nakira. Awesome. Part number two, it needs to follow in gender. Rajulun is masculine. Tawilun, notice the lack of round ties, not tawilatun, is also masculine. Perfect. Well, I also need to make sure it follows in terms of amount. So rajulun means one man. Tawilun also means one man. Perfect. What if I want to say two tall men? How do I dualize rajul? Now I would say raju lani. That means two tall men. Now you cannot say tawilun. You cannot say tawilun. That would be incorrect. طويل is incorrect because even though it follows, the sifa comes after the mawsuf. Rule number one is good to go. Rule 2a, the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in terms of amount, in terms of definiteness. Right? رجلان is nakira. It's not الرجلان. And طويل is also nakira. Awesome. Okay. Number two, um, it needs to follow in terms of gender. رجلان is masculine. There's no wrong. It's not رجلتان. طويل is also masculine. No wrong. For number three, it needs to follow in amount. So because رجلان is dual, I cannot say طويل. I have to say طويلان. Now this over here, I'm just explaining this to you to make it easy. You know, actually, I'm not going to actually require you to look for this right now. We're going to give this some time, bi'idhnillah. And after some time, I'll teach you duals and plurals properly. This is just to understand the rule. That's all there is to it. It's simply to understand the rule. That is all there is to it, all right? Imra'atun tawilatun. Make it dual. Imra'atani tawilatani. If I want to say the two tall men, instead of saying rajulani tawilani, I have to make it the, right? The two tall men. I say ar-rajulani tawilani. So if you want to specify this, it would become ar-rajulani at-tawilani. All right, the two tall men. Imra'atun tawilatun, a tall woman. If I want to say two tall women, imra'atani, ونست ألف نون. طويلتان, ونست ألف نون. ألف نون. If I want to make it the two tall women, المرأتان الطويلتان. المرأتان الطويلتان. I made it specific. Okay, I'm saying the two tall women, not a two tall women, or two tall women. I'm saying the two tall women. And at the same time, I have made the sifa feminine because the mawsuf is feminine. And I've also made the sifa dual because the mawsuf is dual. All right. Plurals are a bit difficult, so we're going to leave plurals for a minute. We're going to leave plurals for now. Okay. Number four, the sifa has to follow the mawsuf in position. The sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in position. And this comes back to what I told you about tawabi'. In a tabi', the second part of the phrase always follows the first. So let's apply this now. In all of our previous examples, رجل طويل, امرأة طويلة, سيارة سريعة. Notice how the first example was always in رفع. The first example was always in رفع. However, if I change the first example, for instance, let's take an example. I want to say the book of a tall man or a tall man's book. Now, this has two phrases. Tall man is a descriptive phrase, right? Mawsuf Sifah. Book of is a possessive phrase. The tall man possesses the book. So I know all the words. And we'll just take this one example and we'll stop at this bi'idhnillah. I know all the words. I know how to say book, kitab. I know how to say tall, طويل. And I know how to say man, رجل. Now I want to say a tall man's book. Now stop the video and try to make sense of this. All right. And it's already if you make a mistake. Chances are you probably will make a mistake. Apply each and every single rule. All right. كتاب, a book. طويل, tall. رجل, man. Okay. A book of a tall man. Number one, what's the possessed? What's the mudaf? Mudaf is kitab. What's the mudaf ilay? Tall man. Again, to make things easy, you see the entire structure is the mudaf ilay. Tall man is the possessor, and the mudaf, the possessed, is the book. Now, when we add these together, what ends up happening? So, someone says kitabu, because mudaf comes first, right? And rule number two, mudaf cannot have alif lam or tanween. It's not al kitabu, it's not kitabun. It's mudaf, so we drop off alif lam and tanween and we bring it first. طويل, because mudaf ilay is in jar, right? Mudaf ilay is a role that falls under jar. Rajulin. Awesome. Not awesome. Why is it not awesome? Because of the fact that Mawsuf, the one being described, has to come before the sifa in Arabic language. So we broke rule number one in Mawsuf Sifah. So we can't say Kitabu Tawilin رجل because طويل, tall is a description of the man. Book of a tall man. You have to bring موصوف first. So you can't say كتاب طويل. Rather, we have to say كتاب رجل. كتاب رجل. All right. Now let's apply the rules of مضاف مضاف إليه موصوف صفة. Rule number one, مضاف comes first. كتاب is coming first. Rule number two, مضاف cannot have ألف لام or تنوين. كتاب does not have ألف لام or تنوين. Rule number three, مضاف إليه, the possessor, رجل is in jar. It's in the position of jar. Awesome. Perfect. All right. When we go ahead and start applying the rules of موصوف صفة, rule number one, the موصوف رجل comes first. The صفة طويل, which is the description of رجل, comes second. The صفة comes second. Rule number two, that's rule number one, right? Mawsuf comes first, صفة comes second. Rule number two, the صفة needs to follow the mawsuf in four things. So, رجل is nakira, it's indefinite. Therefore, طويل is also nakira, no alif lam in طويل. رجل is gender-wise مذكر. Therefore, طويل is also مذكر, no round ta at the end of طويل. رجل is amount-wise, it has to follow in amount, مفرد. It's singular. Therefore, طويل is also singular. It's not طويلاني. What is the lack of alif noon? So it's not dual, it's not plural. All right. Number four, we mentioned to use i'rab. This is position. And position does not mean placement. Position, I told you, means what? The rafa, nasab, and jar. So over here in kitabu rajulin, which position is rajul in? Rajul is serving as the mudaf ilay. Rajul is serving as the mudaf ilay. Kitab is the mudaf. Mudaf ilay is a role in the position of naam, in the position of jar. Now we're telling you that the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in terms of position. Therefore, if the mawsuf rajul is in the position of jar, the sifa also needs to be in the position of jar. All right. So why is rajul in the position of jar? Because we added on kitabu mudaf. Rajul becoming mudaf ilayhi has to be in the position of jar. Therefore, tawilin also has to be in the position of jar. Now, let's, like, again, this is a bit difficult. So we're going to give you another example to make things easy and simple bi'idhnillah. Let's add on a fee. Fee is easier to handle, right? Fee is much easier to deal with. Fee means in. This over here is my harf al-jar. I want to add on an ism after this. Let's say in a big masjid. So how do you say big? Or how do you say masjid is masjid? And how do you say big? Kabir. Kabirun means big. Or just for the sake of keeping the same example, let's take jadid, which means new. Masjid means masjid, and jadid means new. Okay. In a new masjid. So I have my fi, my harf al-jar. Awesome. Now I have to bring a mawsuf and a sifa. Again, the one being described comes first. So I can't say fi jadidin masjidin. Okay, jadid, which means new, is a description. Rather, I have to say fi masjidin. I have to bring masjid first. After I bring masjid, I bring the sifa jadid. Rule number one, mawsuf comes first. And rule number two, sifa comes second. Afwan, rule number one, mawsuf comes first, sifa comes second. Rule number two, sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in four things. So once again, you're going to write out all four things. This is how you apply the rule. Number one, it needs to follow in terms of definiteness versus indefiniteness. So is masjid ma'rifa or nakira? It's not the masjid, it's a masjid. There's no alif lam. Therefore, jadid, you cannot say al jadid. You have to say jadid. It also has to be nakira. So masjidin jadidin. All right, so they follow in terms of nakira. That is a match. Rule number two, in terms of gender, is masjid mudhakkar? Is it masculine? Or is it mu'annath? Is it feminine? The answer is masjid is mudhakkar because there's no round ta at the end. Therefore, you cannot say jadidatin. You cannot say jadidatin. That would be incorrect because the mawsuf is mudhakkar. Therefore, the sifa also has to be mudhakkar. Rule number three, is masjid in terms of amount, the sifa needs to follow the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf. I'm saying rule number three, but technically it's rule 2C. It is rule 2C. Okay. The sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in terms of amount. Is masjid singular? Answer is yes. It's not masjidani. It's not dual. It's not plural. Therefore, if masjid is singular, therefore the sifa also has to be singular. And over here, that's correct because jadid is not dual. It's not jadidani. It should be dual. They are both singular. All right. Finally, rule 2D is that the sifa needs to follow the mawsuf in terms of i'rab. Again, I told you i'rab is position. What is the position of masjidin? Notice the fi entered upon it. So because the fi entered upon masjidin became majur, and the role of majur falls under the position of jar, which is reflected by a kasra. Therefore, you see fi masjidin. Since the sifa is following the mawsuf, you cannot say jadidun and you cannot say jadidan because that would mean you put it into the position of rafa or nasab. Rather, you have to say jadidin. All right. Now, I want you to do the exact same thing for sayyara. Try to say, for instance, from. Again, how do you say from in the Arabic language? Say min. That means from. From a fast car. And then after that, I want you to say from the fast car. That's all the homework you have. From a fast car and from the fast car. How to say this? And when you do this, make sure you apply rule one. Most comes first, see if it comes second, and you apply rule two with all four parts. It has to match in terms of ma'rifah versus nakira. Wasifa needs to follow in terms of mudhakkar and muannas, masculine versus feminine. Wasifa needs to follow in terms of amount. And finally, the sifa needs to follow in terms of position, i.e., i'rab, which I have explained to you over here. Apply this bi'idhnillah, and tomorrow we're going to take this up, and we're going to apply a lot of Quranic examples to make it easy to understand. We're going to try understanding Quranic examples bi'idhnillah. And with that, we will have covered Mawsuf Sifah as well. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.